Fiance cheated on me tonight after 10 years. Never felt like this before. I'm still in shock. I don't know when it's going to properly hit me. I've been with her for 10 years, since I was 20 and she was 17. We met young and grew up together, moved cities, built memories, loved each other with so much passion. I can't help but blame myself. I'm really introverted and that trait just became stronger over the years as I got comfortable with her. Most times I would be happy just sitting and gaming or working on my novel. I feel like I didn't give her the attention she needed and pushed her into this. The day before she told me she cares about me but is falling out of love. Usually she doesn't talk about feelings often and it came out of the blue. She even said herself she prefers to bottle it up. I didn't sleep that night. I just walked around the beach listening to audiobooks trying to correlate everything and find a solution. Eventually I sent her a message in the early AM stating that if she didn't love me anymore she needed to be honest and let me know so we can both move forward. She messaged back when she woke up saying please come home, so I did. Then the crying started and we had a decent conversation. I offered her one of my Valiums and suddenly she was back to her normal self and my heart lifted with hope. Later in the day, she said she wanted to go for a walk. She went to the pet shop, a comfort place, and sent me photos of all the birds and cats. This led to another message saying she saw her friend Jacob there, never heard of the guy, and that they were catching up for a drink. I'm not the jealous type and she's an individual woman, so I said, okay, be safe, I love you. Hours passed with no contact. I started to worry about our conversation from before the Valium and tried calling to see if she was okay. Here is where I did the wrong thing, but I guess I'm glad I did. I went on her Facebook because she'd left her laptop open at home. All through it was her and her best friend talking about how she's with this Jacob guy and not going beyond third base, like that's the cutoff point for cheating. They were laughing about it and hyping up the scenario in the messages like it was something empowering. I've never seen this side of her in my life and it's shifted my whole perception of reality, trust and love. I luckily have supportive parents who I contacted in a fit of tears explaining the situation, and now I'm on a train to the airport to fly north and be around people who love me before I do anything stupid. She sent me a message at 2 a.m. lying, saying she was staying at her girlfriend's, but in the messages she told her friend she was at this guy's house. 10 years of my life just shattered like glass. I don't even feel like a real person right now. I can't stop disassociating. I messaged her saying my dad isn't well and I'm flying up to see him, a white lie, but he does have blood cancer, so it's believable enough. I'm not sure where to go from here. I want to come back and get my cat at some point. He's the only son I have and I'm going to miss him so much. Story 2. Wife tries to force husband's family to sell their grandfather's cabin to buy her out in divorce. The brother of a good friend of mine went through a divorce last year. The divorce was fairly messy. His soon-to-be ex-wife was trying to get as much as she could. My friend and his siblings all jointly inherited their grandfather's cabin a few months earlier. It is situated on a private island in Canada that has been owned by the family for 4 generations. It's about 5,000 square feet, and easily worth over $3 million, and their grandfather had several unexpected private offers over that value, all refused with no interest in selling. The family was notified by her lawyer that she was requesting payment to buy her out of her 1/6 ownership, each sibling owning 1/3, and she was trying to claim half of her husband's share. They tried to discuss a few alternatives, such as giving her a 1/6 right to usage, but no ownership. She declined, apparently intent on forcing them to sell it, knowing none of them could afford to front the money to their brother to keep the cabin in their ownership. Their lawyer, a family friend, did a bunch of work to find a favorable solution for them. In looking over the grandfather's will, he discovered that the divorcing brother did not in fact own any part of the island with the cabin on it. It seemed that their grandfather bought up a bunch of other islands nearby the cabin, and willed them to his grandchildren separately. He only owned a small nearby island, made up of rocks and gravel. Not big enough to build on, and not worth any money at all, not wanting to give her anything at all. They made her an offer attempting to look like they were giving her more than she deserved, and with the appearance of being desperate to keep ownership of the cabin, to give her 75% usage rights of the island, for 25 years, with no ownership. In the offer, they named the worthless island by its legal land title name. She made a counter-offer, which was identical, but she wanted to add her rights to rent the island out for profit, and she wanted choice over her time allocation, which she drafted in the offer. They agreed. Apparently her new boyfriend was more interested in the cabin than the money. They mailed her a set of keys for the cabin. They were keys for a master lock for their life jacket storage box on the dock at shore, as well as a fake key with a bright yellow floating foam keychain. to give her the impression that there would be a boat available to get to the island. They allowed her to believe her deal was for the cabin's island for quite a while, as the divorce was still not finalized. Her first weekend with the island was a long weekend, and she invited her family out, along with her new boyfriend. A 400 kilometers drive. And were greeted by my friend's dad and their lawyer. The whole thing was planned by their lawyer, who I am fairly good friends with as well. He tells me that her family was stranded on the island for hours, as they hired a barge to ferry them over, and they waited until the barge left before going over the details of what she agreed to. He says she attempted legal action once more after that, accusing the family of fabricating the will after the fact. Apparently her lawyer dropped the case before it even started. Update: apparently I had a bunch of the facts wrong on this story. I was rather drunk when I heard this story originally. My friend says that the cabin was not an inheritance at all. The siblings purchased it jointly. Apparently their grandfather had the cabin as an asset that was owned by his business. The business was bought by another company before he passed away, and the siblings quickly bought the cabin back when they discovered that it was sold. Also, the cabin was apparently not owned by the family for generations. It was a group of islands next to the cabin's island that they owned for generations. It seems the grandfather bought several more islands and had the cabin built to bring clients and business partners out for fishing trips. However, while the cabin and the land it was built on were not inheritances, the other group of islands were an inheritance. My friend's brother was already separated from his wife when they acquired the cabin. The wife was misinformed by a family member that the cabin was an inheritance. Story 3. My friend's ex-wife gets his family's business shut down and burns their lives to the ground. Not what you may think. This story isn't about me but two people I'm friends with. We'll call one Ray and one Justin. I'm posting this with Justin's permission, and he'll probably be reading the thread. Some background: Ray and Justin grew up in an extremely restrictive, insular religious community that borders on being a cult. They both read a lot from a young age, even though reading outside of the religion's material was discouraged, and so both of them grew increasingly skeptical and dissatisfied with their environment due to having this peek into the outside world. In high school, this shared mindset brought them together, and they started secretly dating. For context, dating was absolutely strictly verboten in this religious community. You went straight from single to married with zero in between. So when Justin and Ray's parents caught them dating, they forced them to get married. To be clear, it wasn't like they were even having sex. They basically were driving around together and holding hands in the downtown square where all the kids hung out. Very tame, sheltered kid stuff. Ray and Justin started living together as husband and wife, but unfortunately for their families, putting those two together doubled their resiliency, and together they cooked up a plan to get out. They set up a secret bank account at a bank outside the religious community's influence, since their families had access to their accounts, and everyone who worked at the main bank was also in the same community and gossiped about everyone's financial transactions. They started squirreling away money in small amounts the families wouldn't question being missing from their paychecks. When they were 20, they finally had enough money to start over, and they got out. They basically left their house in the dead of night with nothing but what could fit in their car and uprooted to live across the country. Pretty quickly after they moved, they decided to get amicably divorced, since they never wanted to be married anyway. They still lived together for a while, and basically became something between platonic roommates and each other's only family. Over time, they started dating other people. Some partners were scared off by the weird relationship between them, but most got it, and understood that Justin and Ray had basically bonded though mutual trauma. I also met both of them during this time, and we became close friends. This whole time, both their families and other members of their community were relentlessly harassing them. People were showing up at their house at all hours, and they had reason to believe people were trying to steal their identities over the years, though they'd fortunately both put a freeze on their credit, so nothing ever came of it. Then Justin had a bad accident. A really bad accident. He was on his bike and a car blew through a stop sign without slowing down and plowed right into him. He had to be rushed to the hospital and landed in the ICU. Ray was his emergency contact, and I was with her and some other friends when she got the call. I immediately drove her to the hospital with a couple of other people, and she was melting down understandably. The hospital staff wouldn't let us all in when we got there, but they let Ray in. She came out periodically to let us know what was going on. Justin wasn't unconscious, but he was totally out of it and didn't seem to know she was there, probably from the painkillers, but she was convinced he had permanent debilitating brain damage, and basically the group of us were just soothing her and reassuring her it would be fine. A friend of ours who worked at the hospital as an MRI tech was also stopping by when she could on her breaks and calming down Ray. We'd been there all night and part of the day at this point, and the medical staff was giving us reason to be hopeful, but things got worse. To this day, no one knows how they found out, but 14 hours after Justin's accident, his parents, uncles, and grandfather showed up. They immediately had all of us removed from the ICU, Ray included. Unfortunately, as his ex-wife, she was no longer his legal next of kin and had no rights against his blood family. At this point, she was absolutely hysterical and inconsolable. She was convinced Justin's family would hurt him. I'm ashamed to say all three of us that were there with her thought she was overreacting. We all knew Ray and Justin had left a fucked up situation, but it wasn't like his own family would do anything to impede his recovery. She was getting angry with us for trying to calm her down, and tried to explain that according to their religion, she and Justin deserved punishment from God, and only the greatest suffering could prompt repenting and redemption. She said their families embraced this thinking and wanted them to suffer, because it would prove that they did the wrong thing by leaving, and suffering would drive them back to the fold. She said as long as Justin was with his family, he wouldn't be safe. Our friend who worked for the hospital came and found Ray at that point. She made Ray swear up and down she wouldn't tell anyone she told her this, because she could get in deep trouble for releasing privileged information to someone unauthorized, but she'd caught wind that Justin's parents were aggressively demanding the hospital release him into their care, and they were involving lawyers. The hospital was currently refusing, because Justin wasn't stable enough to leave, but our friend warned Ray that as soon as Justin got to be stable, or the lawyers scared the hospital enough, it's possible the parents would be able to take Justin. This shocked the rest of us. Realizing his parents were not only willing to remove Justin from the hospital that had saved his life in the condition he was still in, but were actively trying to do it made us really get for the first time why Ray was going out of her head with fear. At this point, Ray snapped into do or die mode. Convinced that Justin was about to literally die if she didn't act, she decided she would do everything in her power to start a fire at home so that Justin's family would want to run back to put it out. And this wasn't too hard, because she had a lot of dirt on the whole community she came from. Like a madwoman, she started blowing the whistle all over Justin's family. She called the IRS's fraud hotline and detailed all the ways that the family business was committing tax fraud. She submitted an ATF tip about how that same family business was illegally selling firearms without a license and without following any of the proper protocols, and was knowingly selling guns to scene-victed felons. She reported one of Justin's uncles for owning several guns as a scene-victed felon. She also reported Justin's mom's unlicensed daycare business, which was apparently extremely shady, including having over 30 children packed into one house, with Justin's mom as the only adult and many of the childcare duties being farmed out to Justin's 12 and 14-year-old sisters. She called CPS on Justin's uncles and his parents for keeping their children out of school, and for physical abuse in one uncle's case. In all of these reports, she provided extensive details. She finished her calls and emails, and then she waited. We all waited for several hours, and nothing happened. Then, miraculously, Justin became lucid enough to understand what was going on and make his own decisions, and he kicked his family out again. From there began a slow but steady path to recovery. In all the relief and excitement to see Justin on the mend, we'd almost forgotten about Ray's campaign of desperation, until a couple of weeks later, when the screaming voicemails started pouring into both of them. First, the business was being investigated by the IRS, then it was being investigated for illegal firearms dealing. Then the daycare was getting investigated. At first, Ray felt a little guilty, but then she was like, you know what? No regrets. They would have killed Justin. From what they've been able to piece together in the year and a half since this happened, the business has gone under, and the daycare is shuttered. The uncle is 6 months into a new 5-year prison sentence for firearm possession. CPS investigated, which scared the poop out of the family, but nothing really came of it, which is especially sad in the case of the cousins being physically abused. That said, the parents are now too scared to keep the kids home from school, and with the unlicensed daycare shut down, the mom's not exploiting her daughter's labor anyway, so she has no incentive to keep them home. So Justin's little siblings are at least getting their education. Justin and Ray are both happy and thriving. Justin unfortunately will never fully recover from the accident. He has some permanent neurological damage that results in tremors. But he's pumped to be alive, he can work a full-time job, he can still be pretty physically active, and as far as I'm concerned, he wins. Edit, Thank you for the gold and platinum, anonymous Redditors. It's unnecessary, but very appreciated. Edit 2. Sorry, I can't answer any questions about what the religious group cult is, even the PM'd ones. Justin really doesn't want this post coming back to haunt him and Ray IRL, and I feel like I've already probably said more than I should have about it. An update on Justin and Ray, 3 years later. I posted a few years ago. I occasionally get PMs on this account from people wanting to know how Justin and Ray are doing. I doubt many people will see this, since I'm just posting on my Reddit profile instead of in a subreddit, but I wanted to share this for the benefit of anyone still checking in on the original post. Justin gave me the go-ahead to post an update, since a lot has happened since then. Sorry in advance for how long this ended up being. So, to recap, in early September 2017, Justin got in a bad bike accident, and his family came out of nowhere, despite Justin and Ray being no contact with them, and tried to have him removed from the hospital where he was receiving care. Ray freaked out and blew the whistle on a bunch of illegal poop that was happening in both their families of origin. Not a whole lot came of it, to be honest, once the heat blew over. The biggest effect was that Justin's uncle went to prison for the family business illegally selling handguns, but he's been out now for a while on parole. It sounds like Justin's mom is back to her old shenanigans running an unlicensed daycare out of her home. For context, the religious group Justin and Ray come from basically run their town, and these things are all extremely common there. No one properly documents firearm sales because Second Amendment. Many members of this religious group are felons and still own guns again, I guess, because Second Amendment? Businesses are frequently run outside of proper licensure and regulations, with rampant tax avoidance and tax fraud because they answer only to the laws of God? And children are often exploited for their labor and generally neglected, not treated well. Probably in part because it's common for couples to marry very young and then have 5+ children. Justin is one of 3 children, which is considered an unusually small family. So since I last posted in March of 2019, of course, a lot has happened in the meantime. Ray and her girlfriend got engaged at the end of 2019 and were planning their wedding for early fall 2020. When the pandemic happened, they ended up doing a small outdoor elopement that summer instead, with about 10 witnesses, including me and a few others from our core friend group who Justin and Ray refer to as their chosen family. Justin got ordained online through the Universal Life Church and performed the ceremony. It was an awesome day. Ray's family upped their harassment considerably between her engagement and the wedding. Members of their religious order who live in our city were showing up at her house to try to talk to her. When she wouldn't answer the door, they would leave creepy notes taped to her door with short messages like "repent." After the wedding, though, the contact dropped off considerably, which she was very happy about. Justin is doing well. He's been in a serious relationship for the last 2 years with a woman we all love, who has meshed into our little chosen family really well. He's also made amazing progress on his neurological issues from the accident. The doctors say the effects will never go away, but he's adapted really well. He's working full-time with no problem, and is cycling every day again. He's still getting a lot of harassment, unfortunately, but it never escalates to anything scarier than a lot of phone calls which he blocks as new numbers pop up and the occasional doorbell which he never answers. Justin and Ray still don't know how their families of origin are tracking them. They've been living in our city for over a decade now, and they've each moved residences several times during that time frame and changed their numbers a few times. Each time, the family seems to know that new information almost immediately. They continue calling them and leaving voicemails at the new numbers. Members of their religious group are showing up at the new house almost immediately, etc. Justin was subletting for a couple of years in a gated condo complex, which was awesome while it lasted, since his family's emissaries couldn't get in. After my last post, I bullied them into getting a forensic sweep of all their devices and digital accounts, but it turned up nothing. No spyware on their devices, no logins to any of their accounts coming from their birth state, etc. Their social media is heavily locked down, privacy-wise, and even then they're both very careful about what they post. I've Googled both their names, and I'm not finding anything on those private database sites involving their info. So that part remains a mystery. I still welcome ideas on how their families are tracking them. The biggest update, though, is that Justin and Ray have become an informal lifeline out of their creepy hometown, which has been really cool to see. The oldest of Justin's little sisters was the first one. She turned 18 early last year and reached out to Justin on Instagram. She had been accepted to college and her parents forbade her from going and had upped their strictness, including grounding her, because they were so pissed she applied at all. Justin sent her a plane ticket, and she followed in his footsteps, packed up her essential belongings when her parents were both out of the house, and got the duck out of Dodge. She stayed with him in our city, and then in the fall, moved to college and is living in the dorms there. Justin has assured her that she always has a home with him on her school breaks, and that if there's another COVID wave that closes her dorms and pushes her classes to being online only, she can come stay with him again and do her classes online from his house. The next Lifeline recipient was a 19-year-old boy Justin and Ray didn't really know, who had been a friend of Justin's sister from school. He stayed in touch with her after she got out, and Justin ended up buying a plane ticket for him too. He actually came and stayed with me, since I had a spare room and Justin's sister was still at his place at the time, and he was a really cool little dude. And yes, I started getting people showing up at my door after he moved in. Wild times. I helped him get a job and after a few months, he moved into a house share with roommates his own age. We all still see him around a lot, and he seems to be doing really well. Let me tell you, the kid is overjoyed with the casual dating model in the secular world, and has been putting a lot of mileage on the apps. He doesn't think he wants to go to college, but I've been encouraging him to look at trade programs and apprenticeships. We'll see. The most recent recipient of the Justin and Ray Instagram DM Foundation for Cult Escapism is Ray's 25-year-old cousin. She was stuck in an abusive marriage, and the religious group her family was basically telling her to suck it up and deal with it, and be a submissive godly wife and try harder to get pregnant to make her husband happy. She got in touch with Ray because she had no one else to turn to, and Ray helped her get out and come to our city. That's been a bit of a weird situation, because unlike the other two, the cousin is still more or less a true believer. She only left because she was convinced her husband would kill her. And she's been kind of poopty and homophobic about Ray's wife, even though Ray is literally the only one helping her. But Ray has been an absolute angel to her despite that, and keeps telling us that deprogramming takes time when we complain about her. It's unclear yet how the family feels about Justin and Ray helping the three escapees, or whether they're blaming them as corrupting influences. Weirdly, the cousin and the friend have both been getting the same harassment that Justin and Ray have consistently gotten over the years, but Justin's sister hasn't heard a single peep, either here in our city or away at college. Beats me as to why or what the difference is. Story 4, Pastor lies, cheats and steals. He gets exactly what he deserves. Sorry I am on mobile. Also, I'm sorry but I need to be very vague about where this happened. The cast: Pastor Bob, not real name. Contractor: me, Caldra or Op if you want. Setup: I have been a computer technician for more than 15 years. I have worked on all kinds of computers. Everything from tiny point-of-sale computers to large rack server computers. I had been attending a new-to-me church. I was trying to date a woman there. This church was her idea. That relationship crashed and burned, but that's a different story. Now we can start. It was about 5 years ago. I had just sat through a long sermon about generosity and giving to those that need help. At the end of the sermon, Pastor Bob asked for an additional donation because the church's roof needed repairs. And it would cost $20,000 US. That's right, 20,000 freedom dollars for a new roof. After the service, I'm talking to my date. Pastor Bob walks over to me. I said hi and he introduced himself. We talk a bit. Pastor Bob asked what I do for a living. I tell him I'm a computer tech with a shop. As I'm telling him, I have a feeling he already knows what I do. Pastor Bob asks me to have a look at his laptop. It's being very slow, so I agree. I turn the laptop on and I hear a clicking noise. This clues me in it's probably the hard drive. But I can still access the data. This is a good thing because it means I can probably recover the data. So, I tell Pastor Bob the hard drive is dying and it needs to be replaced. I also tell him I can probably recover the data. Pastor Bob asked how much it would cost to fix. I tell him for most people I would charge around $250. However, I feel I can donate my time, so I would just need $60 for a new hard drive. Pastor Bob agrees, so I write up an invoice. New hard drive $60, labor $0, data recovery $0, and 2 to 4 days for repair. Pastor Bob signed the invoice. Thus, I take the laptop to my shop. I open the laptop. HP, why do you use so many screws and clips? I get the hard drive out and connect it to my recovery rig. I set up the recovery to clone the data to a new hard drive. But not the new one for the laptop. A high-end storage drive. I go home after locking up the shop. Next day Monday I open the shop and check the recovery rig. It's working, but it will take at least 10 more hours. So, I start work on the other tickets. Then at closing time I lock up and go home. Next day Tuesday, I've had Pastor Bob's laptop for 2 days. I open the shop and check my recovery rig. Good news, recovery completed, 100% data recovered. Report says hard drive developed to many bad sectors. Now I have a choice to make. I could put a 1 terabyte hard drive $60 or a 120 gigabytes SSD $60. Or I could pay some money myself for a 240 gigabytes SSD $100. I decide why not and put the 240 gigabytes SSD in the laptop. I then clone all the data over from the new recovery storage drive to the new 240 gigabytes SSD. An hour later the clone is done. So, I check everything. The laptop works great and is exactly like how it was before the first hard drive died. Even the login still worked. Therefore, I call Pastor Bob and tell him his computer is done. He says that's great, he will be here soon to get it. About 45 minutes later Pastor Bob walks in. I show him his laptop working and much faster. He loves it and signs the pickup form. He then pays me with a check for $60. It's important he paid with a check. I do a bank run on Monday and Friday. So that Friday at the bank, I am informed that Pastor Bob's check is void. What? Why? Pastor Bob had placed a stop payment on the check. Consequently, I called him and he ignored my call. I go to church on Sunday. Pastor Bob gives a sermon about not lying. I walk up to talk to him and he avoids me. So, I leave and decide I'm going to write it off. I spent $100 and some time to do something nice. A few weeks later a customer walks in looking for a new computer. To welcome him I offer him a drink and go over his options. I'm chatting him up and he tells me he is a contractor, he mostly does siding and roofing. He is thinking about offering solar. That's why he is getting a new computer. I ask how much does a new roof cost? He says up to about $10,000. So I ask him why would someone say $20,000? He had no idea. I thought it was strange. I asked about the church. Contractor said it would have been simple and around $5,000. And he could probably do it for less. Contractor buys a nice new laptop. Sorry the setup took so long, the revenge starts now. Something about what the contractor said bugs me later. Why would Pastor Bob lie and say $20,000 for a new roof? And why would he stiff me for $60? I then remember I never cleared the recovery rig storage drive. I check and there it is, Pastor Bob's laptop data. I look around, it's slow and I'm all caught up on repair tickets. Fittingly I look around a bit. He had all of his logins stored in a folder on the desktop, including his online dating logins. And online poker. Did I ever mention Pastor Bob is married? I start printing his online dating messages. I look back and find Pastor Bob had been adult hugging several women from his online dating. He had been paying for his dates from the church's donation fund. I am getting angry now. Then I realize he had adult hugged the woman I was dating when I was dating her. It was then I decided to break Pastor Bob. I printed out all his dating messages and the women he adult hugged. For the last 6 months, except I refused to print the naughty pictures. It was an impressive packet. I then decide I need copies of the packet. Therefore, I order 100 packets printed from a major online printer. A few days later my order of revenge packets arrived. These revenge packets are amazing, double-sided. Staple bound, with a cover with Pastor Bob's face on it. Now the conclusion, and I think it's worth it. This church had a calendar of what the sermon might be about. A perfect Sunday was approaching. I go to church that perfect Sunday. I show up a bit late. Everyone is in the church, so I put a revenge packet on each car. I have a few revenge packets that are in yellow envelopes. Fittingly I put them in the mail. I sent one to all the high-ups in the church. And I sent a special packet with some of Pastor Bob's naughty pics to Pastor Bob's wife. I set the return address to the church. I also emailed a bunch of people the revenge packet from a burner email. A couple weeks after I went back to that church, Pastor Bob was gone, so was the wife. Several of the women were also gone, including the one I was dating. I asked one of the important people there, what happened? The answer was amazing. I was told about the revenge packet and how everyone had gotten one. The day my revenge packet appeared, the sermon Pastor Bob had given was about the evils of adultery and cheating on your wife. Thank you, church calendar. The fallout. Pastor Bob was fired and shunned. Multiple women from the church have not returned, including the one I was dating. Pastor Bob's wife is divorcing him. And she is the one that owned the house and cars. No longer Pastor Bob is now being sued by several people, including the one that fixed the roof. He never paid any of them. There were also rumors of a criminal case for embezzlement. No one has seen Bob in a while now. The church might close if they can't find a new pastor. But the church's money is very low. Apparently, he also spent over $30,000 on online gambling. Notes, because you might ask, it's quite possible that several of the very young children and babies at the church were his. But I cannot confirm this. I have no idea where Bob is now. I would think still in jail. Edit. Thank you so much for the awards, it's amazing.